Okay, hi, this is Peter Rogers, MD, with YouTube channel, same name, and I'm interviewing world and Olympic champion Mark Schultz, three-time NCAA champion wrestler, also a UFC champion. How you doing, Mark?
And my gymnastics.
And state champion of California in gymnastics.
Yeah, I'm doing good. All you folks out there that don't know Pete Rogers, I was his coach when he was at Stanford. And there was a time where Pete was asked to relinquish his scholarship, to make his scholarship available to someone else. And the coach forced him to give a speech in front of the whole team. And after that speech, I got really angry because I knew the potential that Pete had. And I got pissed because he was, I could tell this was not right, what was happening. And so I took him under my wing and we went and worked out. And I said, you got to wrestle for different reasons. You got to wrestle to learn how to fight, not to win for Stanford or for the coach. And you got to get out of that dorm you're in, which is full of, academics, but none of them are athletes. And you got to get around athletes. So you moved into the Delta Tau Delta house and associated with athletes, and you kept your scholarship and became the winningest wrestler in Stanford history, and you were student athlete of the year. And then you went on to write straight A's at Stanford and on to Harvard, and how to cure back pain, which I have in my book right now. Anyway, that's who Pete Rogers is. And he became an incredible doctor, had the highest biochemistry score in the history of Harvard entrance exams. I mean, this guy's a genius. He's like the Einstein of whatever. Anyway, he turned himself into a genius. So now the audience knows who you are, Pete.
I almost dropped out of Stanford. Mark Schultz saved me. I was ready to quit. The head coach didn't like me, tried to make me give up my scholarship. And Mark just said, you come train with me. You hang around with wrestlers. You need to think like a wrestler. And he started telling me all the stories about all the Russians, about wrestling the Russians, about Gene Mills when he had to wrestle Shagayev, defending world champ, and everybody was, worried about the match. And Mills said, I'm going to kick the shit out of Shagayev. And it kind of, just being around you, I got my confidence sort of came back as an athlete, and I just kept getting better. And that was really good.
Yeah, that was the best coaching experience of my life up to that point. And even after that point, I mean, to me, I was just in it for myself until I met you. And that gave me a reason to share my knowledge with someone else. Because, it's very difficult for me to share knowledge because it's so difficult to go through the thousands and thousands of wrestling moves that you have to learn. And the only way to learn is by trial and error. And I had got about, 7 or 8 moves that worked against everybody in the world. And I wasn't about to share that knowledge with anybody, but you gave me a reason to share that knowledge with somebody. And then
the other thing too, I would say that really helped me was the idea of the intensity of purpose. Because a lot of the wrestlers at Stanford kind of had an attitude, well, wrestling is fun. It keeps us in shape. It's kind of like a hobby. And that's not good enough at the college level. At the college level, you would say, Pete, this guy's your worst enemy in the world. He's trying to beat you up and embarrass you in front of his friends, in front of your friends. And it's true. And getting all psyched up, that really helped. And then also when you're talking about dominating at the world level, I'm like, well, gosh, the least I could do is, win conference. So it's a good motivator.
Yeah, and you won conference.
Yeah, I don't know for sure if I even did win conference, but I won several matches at NCAAs. And like I said, I was undefeated in dual meets. I beat a couple All-Americans. My ability, more than doubled after I started hanging around with you. So I wish I'd talked to you my first day of freshman year. I was scared to talk to you guys until after the sophomore season. It was kind of like, you guys are coaching the senior guys. I mean, I started on varsity as a freshman, but I was kind of back and forth with injuries and stuff. I wasn't fully into it, and I was afraid I was going to flunk out of school. So, like I said, if I'd have talked to you guys right in the beginning, I would have been so much better off. But, I didn't know.
Yeah, and I didn't know either. I mean, I didn't really talk to anybody. I wasn't really into coaching for, because I wanted to teach kids how to wrestle. I was in it to train for the Olympics and the World Championships. And it just I never had a reason to share my knowledge or help anybody else out except myself. And that's a very selfish way to live. But
yeah, but
wrestling,
when
you
you're
gotta
going for an
do that.
Olympic title, you got to be selfish. I mean, you know what else you reminded me of? You reminded me of Walter Payton. He was the running back for the Chicago Bears in the sense that he had said something similar to you. He said, before a big competition coming up, he likes to be very silent. If you're silent for a prolonged amount of time, it somehow enables you when the time is right to step in and take the upper edge, the upper hand, if you will. And you would be quiet sometimes for a week or 2 weeks before a big match, to the point where it was almost scary, and you would wear sunglasses so nobody could tell what you were thinking. And you were like the most intimidating guy in the whole United States.
Yeah, and we had a lot of fun together, going around to the different frats trying to get beer from them. But I won't talk about that.
Yeah. I had some funny pictures from that one night where those guys threw that junk off the roof of the fraternity house. It's kind of funny. My father came by like the next day, and he's like, "Peter, this is a disgrace. You don't have to live here. I'll give you money. You can move somewhere else. You don't have to live here." I'm like, "Dad, I love it. This is my favorite place I've ever been since I've been here at Stanford."
Yeah, I met John Elway in that house.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a member.
That's the athlete frat. It was the best place.
Yeah.
The best place on the whole campus.
Yeah, it's the only place athletes could, feel at home, I felt. I mean, I never even saw that place before. I didn't even know that place existed. And then I think you found it, or maybe Dave Lee found it. I don't know. I think I knew about it before. I don't know if I did before you did or not, but that was definitely the place to go to get out of that mindset that all the other students had. I mean, they're all valedictorians, but they don't know what it's like. Nobody knows what it's like to wrestle until you.
Yeah, Stanford's a really wimpy place. It's very hard to maintain a tough mentality. That's why we used to always listen to heavy metal music. I used to read Conan the Barbarian comic books, just something to get my mentality right for wrestling. And then hanging around with you and your brother, that's the thing I needed too. And then, the same thing too was in practice, Porpel didn't let you and Dave talk enough. So he would show us all this stuff that worked for him, but didn't work for anybody else. But anyways, how's everything? How are things going?
That was okay with me because I didn't want to show anybody anything that, I didn't want to give away my secrets. So he can talk all he wants. But you gave me an outlet to teach. And finally, I mean, that was probably the first time I ever taught anybody anything.
Yeah, everybody was pretty much scared of you. It's just a fact.
Well, I remember telling you, you're not wrestling to win tournaments or championships or titles. You're in it to learn how to beat the shit out of people. That's the reason I wrestled. And I don't know, I just felt like, what good is a sport unless it has some real life application? Well, wrestling's got a real life application. It's a martial art. Well, it's a foundation for martial. It's a sport, but it's the best foundation for martial arts. I mean, if you look at the UFC champions now, I think 28 are have their main foundation as wrestling, and like 17 have jiu-jitsu, and then boxing and kickboxing are down the list, somewhere. But wrestling and jiu-jitsu are, wrestling's on top, and jiu-jitsu's right underneath that. And I got your brother Mark into jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, he did really good because he stayed in shape and he kept training, and he became a world champion. You know what else happened to him? When he was in college, everybody thought he'd be an All-American. He was state champion freestyle and Greco-Roman in high school, but he was a bit of a disappointment in college. Never was an All-American, and I think the reason was It turns out later, when he's around 40, he became a vegetarian, and he markedly reduced his salt intake, and his endurance dramatically improved at that point. So he had a salt-induced exercise asthma. Salt can make the immune system hyperreactive, and that would make him get tired in the third period. And, and guys from Iowa would just wear him down and beat him. But once he got his energy back, he became, I think he's like a 3-time world champion now in, I think it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something.
It's Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I wish I continued, but, I work all the time.
Yeah. No, don't worry about that. That what you're doing is you're saving lives, actually. So you need to.
I try to help people as best I can. I'll tell you what's the funny thing in medicine, though. There's acute disease where you really help people. They come in with an obvious cause, fall down, fracture, bone broke, must fix. But most patients have chronic disease. And the reality of the situation is there's no money in teaching them how to get better. The money is keep them on pills or operate on them.
Yeah. So I think people would really benefit by you telling that story of how you got fat and then learned about nutrition, and you created the Spartan vegan diet, and now you're all skinny and healthy and your blood pressure's really low. And I think people should know about that. I don't know if you want to tell them about that on this podcast for free, but
it's all for free. I do the whole thing for free. I'm kind of have fun with it. It's a creative outlet. It only takes like part of my IQ to do conventional medicine. On this one, I'm able to sort of challenge myself intellectually. Basically, I was like the best biochemistry student in the entire United States, and we're told that nutrition is bundled into that. But then I'm in my mid-30s and I'm fat, early to mid-30s, and I'm fat, and I'm like, holy crap, how did this happen? I was working like a maniac. I was trying to do 2 fellowships simultaneously. I authored a textbook that year, had a baby at home with the wife. I was working super long hours. So anyways, but I got fat. And I figured, well, no big deal. I'll just exercise more and eat less. I can lose this weight. Plus, my father had coronary artery disease, was considering open heart surgery. My mother was dying of cancer. And I'm like, if I'm such a great doctor and I know all the stuff that, I'm supposed to know, how come my father has heart disease? He could die from this. My mother's dying of cancer. And I'm a big fatso. I'm about 5'9" in height, and I weigh 220 pounds. I'm like, either medicine sucks or I'm doing something wrong. And so then my family was all mocking me, hey, fatso, and, you're going to be impotent soon, diabetic soon. And my wife's like, oh, my life will get easier. And I'm like, you know what? This is ridiculous. So I said, I got to figure this out. So I began to read intensely. All of my energy and focus centered then on understanding nutrition and disease causation. What I found out was all of the textbooks are wrong. They're all kind of a joke. And I'm not kidding.
That read about nobody knows this in the whole world. Nobody knows this.
Yeah. In coronary artery disease, all the books will say, you need a stent, and if you can't stent, then do a bypass, maybe try some medications, a statin and some aspirin. Okay, but that's nonsense. In the comparison with the Esselstyn diet, he has 198 patients in a row. Cured, no more problems. Okay? There's nothing remotely like that.
His name's Esselstyn, right?
Yeah, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. His book is Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And I went and trained with him as well. And what I'm saying is there was chapter after chapter where that came up. I read about autoimmune disease. And in the big chapter from the Harvard textbook, the one I used to admire, okay? And then I read it, and it's a joke. There's no mention of autoimmune mechanisms like leaky gut, or there's a couple other mechanisms I could go into. None of the relevant mechanisms are in the standard textbook. And this is a 2,000-page book. It's not like there's not enough room to fit it in there. They're not in there. I have the current up-to-date version, the one that's considered the standard. It's not in there. Same thing with hypertension. You know what they do for hypertension? They go, 95% of hypertension is essential hypertension, meaning that the cause is unknown. That's all bullshit.
Oh, yeah. I noticed that too. Whenever doctors give, you're trying to look up something on the internet, and they always say, well, this hasn't been, it may not be, proven yet. This may not be, they use like the word may and may not, just to try to they try to muddy the waters, so that you never really get a grasp on what you need to do to get healthy. And I think you're the first guy I've seen that has decided to learn about all the things they didn't teach you in medical school about how to prevent disease, how to stay healthy and live longer and have more energy. Doctors don't tell you how to do that. But this diet and lifestyle the Spartan vegan diet, that definitely increases energy and it lowers your fat. It makes you live longer. It prevents disease. And I I think people would be surprised just how easy it is. I mean, it's hard to do, but it's simple. It's like wrestling. Wrestling is the hardest thing there is. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah, and a big part of it is they got to unlearn all the stuff they've heard in the past. The thing that gets promoted most of the time is the Mediterranean diet, but the Mediterranean diet is a joke. I call it the Antichrist of diets. The reason is it promises to save you, but it doesn't work at all. It's a big joke. It doesn't forbid anything. People are, guzzling down olive oil. It allows alcohol. It allows chicken and fish, nuts and seeds, all these high-fat foods and avocados. Those just plug up arteries. You need to be very low in fat. That's one of the key things about preventing atherosclerosis. Low in fat and low in sodium. And then a high in potassium. That's how you prevent hypertension. The Mediterranean diet does not address those essential things, and therefore it doesn't work.
No, why don't you explain what the blue zones are?
Yeah, there's a guy by the name of Dan Buettner with National Geographic, and they looked at the data from around the world. What are like the 5 healthiest populations where the people live the longest in their 90s and 100s, and that they're still healthy and they're still mentally sharp. And then they looked at what did they have in common. Only one of them was in America. That was the Loma Linda which is a suburb of Los Angeles in California. And the Seventh-day Adventists, it's part of their religion to be a plant-based diet. Okay, so it's religious rather than health-based, but they're still remarkably healthy, especially they're vegans. Then it was also the Okinawans, which is sort of in southern Japan, and it's kind of like what Hawaii is to America. That's what Okinawa is to Japan. And back in the early part of the 1900s, they ate primarily sweet potatoes, and they also ate, rice and local foods, and they had incredible longevity. They were second to the Seventh-day Adventists and the longest lived lives when they ate those old-fashioned diets. Lots of them were farmers. They didn't have a car. They would walk out to their farm property and stuff. Then there's another one in Icaria. I think that's with Greece. And gosh, I know one's in Costa Rica, and then I forget the other one. But
Italy? Is it Italy?
Yes, Sardinia, that's it. Sardinia, I think that's right by Italy. So anyways, what they all had in common was they ate 95% or more plant-based foods. Nowadays, Buettner will say, 90% or more, but he used to say 95%. And so that's what I think is funny too. They're all, other than Loma Linda, Los Angeles suburb, they're all kind of, backward. Okay, they're rural people. A lot of them are illiterate. So that's what's funny. All these Americans, I got to join a health club and all this fancy stuff. No, just eat the plant foods that grow outside that humans have been eating for thousands of years. Walk around and keep busy in the day, and you'll be healthy.
Yeah, not only that, but your what is it? Your dental plate, or what do they call that? In the mouth, it narrows when you're not eating the right foods. And these primitive, primordial humans, their mouth is a lot wider, and they don't get cavities, and they're just much healthier. And
there's a guy who wrote about that. His name was Weston Price, and he was a dentist in the 1920s and 30s. He traveled around the world looking at all these populations, and the ones that were eating their old-fashioned diets, they all would have close to zero, if any, cavities, good strong teeth. And then, like, if one person in their family went and started working in the city and started eating, refined bread, refined flour, and sweets, and all the modern processed food, they would get tons of cavities. So, and you're right, they'd also get a deformity of their mouth. Their jaw would not be formed normally. They kind of have this mouth breather, narrow look to their mouth, to their faces. Their face looks a little funny. It's abnormally narrow at the bottom.
Right. And the people that lived in the primordial eras never had any of that because they didn't have all this manufactured food. Isn't it true that pretty much every food that's manufactured is bad for you?
Yeah, they're all bad. The only exception that I would eat would be if there's a single ingredient, and that would be plain oatmeal and quinoa, which is pretty much like oatmeal. Those are the only ones. and I would only eat those with water. Once you get into a second ingredient, they're allowed to put MSG in there, monosodium glutamate, which is a mild neurotoxin. So I would not eat anything with that in there. Yeah, so I don't eat any processed food. I call it a whole food, plant food diet.
Right. And eating the food as a whole unit is part of the key, right?
Yeah, look at our teeth. Okay. When you look at your teeth, our teeth are flat. If you go into your browser and you type in teeth of a horse, look at your teeth, they're flat. The reason is flat teeth are for grinding plants. Also, our jaw, it goes side to side. That is characteristic of a plant eater, a herbivore. If you were walking down a path in the forest and you saw a dead deer on the ground, the flies buzzing around, you would say to yourself, it's kind of disgusting. Okay. You don't get this immediate feeling, I got to get down on my knees and take a bite out of it. Your mouth couldn't even pierce its hide. Okay. On the other hand, if we put a bowl of fruit out on the table, you would salivate. We're made for that.
Right. That's the optimal human diet is plants, right?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why we got color vision, so we can see when fruits are ripe. That's normal.
Right. And those colors are because of the different chemicals in each, like the grapes are purple because of the chemical. What's the,
yeah, you're right. It's the antioxidants. The antioxidants in the different colorful fruits, they give off characteristic colors, like, beta carotene orange with carrots. And like you're saying, with the grapes, you can get a purple or a green.
Right. So you should pretty much just keep your shopping limited to the produce section if you want to live long, stay healthy, and lose weight, have more energy, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say there's basically 3 foods that I recommend to eat. Number 1 is your starches, and that's usually should be the main number of your calories, about 50 to 80%, and that includes things like rice, beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, quinoa, oatmeal. Those are great supplies of energy to starches. So starch is just a polymer of glucose, and it's all wrapped in fiber. I used to include corn in that and wheat, but there's so many GMO variants on that I would stay away from those 2 foods because they get too complicated. Then the next category of foods is the fruits, and fruits are great. I love fruits. The catch with fruits, though, is they're more expensive. Unless they're frozen, they don't store as long. So they're a little bit more troublesome to acquire on a frequent basis. They don't satisfy hunger quite as well as starch, but they're good. And I mean, if you're lucky enough to live somewhere kind of semi-tropical, like Texas or Hawaii or South California or something where it's hotter all year, they're more widely available, or Florida or something. But for a lot of people living up north, it's going to cost you a lot of money to eat fruits that much. Other than, you can freeze stuff. Frozen blueberries are great food. Then the next thing is vegetables, but vegetables only need to be about 5 to 10% of your calories. 5% is fine. It's probably a good idea to eat at least 1 salad a day. If you're trying to heal something, I would say eat 2 salads a day. It's got a lot of greens. They also have nitrates, precursors to forming nitric oxide. The back of your tongue has bacteria on it that convert the nitrates to nitric oxide, and then actually the stomach acid also facilitates that conversion to nitric oxide, and that leads to total body systemic vasodilation, improved blood flow.
So a polymer of glucose, you mean like it's just like a giant clump of glucose is what that
right.
means.
So a starch is a whole bunch of glucose molecules, one after another, a string of them. And then they're all wrapped in fiber. So this is a great thing because it's low caloric density. Your stomach is stretched by not that many calories. Early satisfaction of hunger is from the stretching of the stomach. Then the food goes into your gut and it has to peel off that fiber before the glucose can be absorbed into your blood. And that process of slowly peeling off the fiber creates the effect of a slow release energy pill. So your blood glucose stays normal a prolonged amount of time. You satisfy your hunger and maintain your blood glucose level for the most prolonged amount of time with the fewest calories. So it's very efficient, and it prevents you from getting fat. It gives you lots of energy. It's like, what more could you want? If you look at the Asians, okay, China before 1975, when they used to eat about 85-90% of the calories from rice, 1 billion out of 1 billion are skinny. No diabetes, no hypertension, no autoimmune disease, close to nothing for cancer. It makes people healthy. Same thing, Papua New Guinea, they used to eat 93% of their calories from sweet potatoes. They're all skinny and strong, okay? Starches make a population skinny and strong and energetic.
So why didn't you tell the people what you mean by leaking gut or leaky gut?
Yeah, basically, there's two types of gut bacteria. You're going to hear all this stuff, the gut microbiome, almost all these videos on YouTube, they're stupid. They just confuse you. They don't tell you what the point is. There are two types of gut microbiome. There's the good one and the bad one. The good one comes from eating fiber. The fiber feeds your gut bacteria, and they take that fiber and they convert it into what are called short-chain fatty acids. The most important one has 4 carbons. That's butyrate. You can think about, your alkanes if you're thinking about chemistry. Butane is a 4-carbon alkane. You put a carboxylic acid on it. Now you got a 4-carbon carboxylic acid. Okay, so that's butyric acid. You can also call it butyrate. And the point is, that is what is used by the gut lining cells to maintain tight junctions. The gut's called the enteric tract. So the cells that line the gut are called the enterocytes. And they need to be tight between each other so that nothing leaks in between them. If they don't get the butyric acid, they'll start to leak. And what that means is bigger chunks of food and even entire bacteria, bacterial endotoxins can get across that space between the enterocytes because of lack of tight junction. That's called leaky gut. And the relevance is normally you should not absorb anything more than 3 amino acids strung together. They call that a tripeptide. So a bond between 2 amino acids is a peptide bond. So 2 amino acids would be dipeptide, 3 amino acids would be tripeptide. And if you absorb more than a tripeptide, let's say a big chunk of protein, your immune system will recognize it as foreign and form antibodies to it. And then what happens is the amino acid sequence of a protein from another animal is relatively similar to your own, but it's slightly different. So you'll form antibodies to it, and then it'll mimic proteins inside your body. And so that's called molecular mimicry. And those antibodies will then cross-react with your own bodily proteins. So molecular mimicry with autoantibody cross-reactivity. And so what that means is because of the foreign material getting in and your immune system attacking it, your immune system becomes confused, and now it travels all over the body, and these antibodies start attacking your own body. Like a typical example would be, let's say you eat a hot dog, and there's ground up animal thyroid in that hot dog. And then you got leaky gut. It gets into your blood. Your immune system's like, what the hell is this? Attack, attack, attack. And they're like, hey. And then they travel around the body and they're like, hey, this looks like the same thing. And they attack your own thyroid. And there you go. You screwed. You lose your thyroid. Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Okay. And it'll do that to other parts of your body. In the brain, multiple sclerosis. Okay. In the pancreas, in a baby, in a young kid. Type 1 diabetes, especially associated with dairy. Okay. People don't realize that dairy is kind of dangerous, especially, in kids.
Yeah. I mean, dairy is, it's formula to create gigantic animals out of these little calves. And here we are, human beings, drinking their milk. It's not natural for one species to be drinking the milk of another species, right?
Yeah, there's no species that drinks the milk of another species. The amino acid composition is quite different from human milk. The protein content is quite different. It's really not a good idea. I mean, if you have to give formula, because so many women work nowadays, you can use a hypoallergenic form. But the best thing is breast milk by far.
Best thing is formulas. Oh, breast milk. Yeah.
Yeah, soy formula is even worse.
What?
Soy formula is even worse for babies.
Oh, wow. So, okay. Well, the point of all this is to live healthier, with more energy, with longer, and prevent disease. And you mentioned a doctor named Esselstyn, who I heard has a 100% cure rate for his patients. Is that right?
Yeah, if the patients follow his diet, they all get better. Any patients, he said that the ones that didn't follow his diet, they don't get better. But as far as I'm aware, the ones who actually do follow the diet get better. I heard about one potential case report of a patient who claims to not have got better. So I haven't looked into that in more detail. But what I'm trying to say is 198 patients in a row, there's nothing like that in any other aspect of treating chronic disease. There's nothing like it. Except for when you see people go on this low fat, low sodium, whole food, vegan diet, and that means no meat, no dairy, no meat, not one bite, no oil, not one drop. Okay. That's how you get healthy. And a lot of people go, oh, well, that's too strict. why are you so strict? And my response is, because that's what works. The way to think is, think like a championship athlete. I must train every day. I must push myself harder. That's how you should think about your health. Not like a typical wimpy, stupid person. Everything in moderation. No. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. That's social thinking. When you go to a party at a new place, fine. But when it comes to health, you want to think biblical. Thou shalt not eat meat. Thou shalt not eat oil, because that's what works. Okay, I don't have any animal rights. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to be healthy. I want to keep the Johnson working. I want to keep the brain working. I want the heart working. And that's what you got to do. You got to keep the arteries open.
Yes. So it's simple, but it's not easy. That's why you call it the Spartan diet, vegan diet. You got to be kind of like the Spartans. You got to be like a warrior. You got to be like an athlete, or like a soldier. You got to stick to the discipline to stay within that